This is a map of the known world from 1531. Notice anything peculiar? It accurately depicts Antarctica when it wasn't covered in ice, nearly 300 years before Russian explorers first spotted it off the coast of South America. In fact, Antarctica shows up on many ancient maps, drawn with impossible precision.
One of the things I find most striking is the presence of Antarctica on ancient maps, because we didn't discover it until 1820, and yet it's on maps drawn in the 1500s with great detail.
This conversation between Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock changes everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations. How did map makers in the 16th century know about Antarctica? And what does it have to do with DNA traces of long-lost civilizations in the Amazon?
There's a genetic connection between certain tribes in the Amazon and the peoples of Melanesia, of Papua New Guinea.
Who were the first people to reach the furthest corners of the Earth? And what happened to them?
This was truly a global event, and it changed the world.
What if everything you knew about human history was just one chapter of a much longer story? Stay with us. Who were the first explorers in history? Polynesians are generally accepted as the first explorers to scale the vast oceans of the Earth. We don't know where they came from, but we know where they ended up. From Taiwan to Hawaii to New Zealand, they were the first recorded people to settle far-off islands in the Pacific. Modern archaeology celebrates the Polynesian expansion as the first great seafaring journey around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago.
The great seafaring adventure that is accepted by archaeology is called the Polynesian expansion, and it's a remarkable story, and that occurs roughly 3,000 to 3,500 years ago.
They crossed thousands of kilometers in the open ocean with astonishing precision.
And those Polynesians were amazing ocean navigators. They could cross distances of thousands of kilometers with pinpoint accuracy.
They were the first people to settle Easter Islands, at a time when no other civilization had the tools or knowledge to do that. This wasn't just luck, it was navigation skill at the highest level, placing them in the history books as pioneers. But Graham Hancock is not convinced that they were the first people to do so. In fact, there's evidence to believe that an advanced civilization around 12,800 years ago may have reached as far as Antarctica.
They knew how to navigate, and they knew how to build seagoing ships. And they explored the world, and they mapped the world.
Our first clues come from maps drawn by cartographers in the 15th and 16th centuries. It was a time when ancient maps started appearing in Europe and the Middle East, offering us the first evidence of ancient knowledge still existing in the world around that time.
A category of ancient maps called portolanos, which suddenly started to appear just after the crusade that entered Constantinople and sacked Constantinople.
These maps show Earth as it was during the last ice age, when vast stretches of land that are now submerged were still above sea level. But here's the strange part. The maps also include accurate positions of places like Antarctica, which was only discovered by European explorers in 1820.
On these Portolano-style maps, you do find a depiction of Antarctica again and again. And another thing that these maps have in common is that many of the map makers state that they based their maps on multiple older source maps.
These charts are drawn with shocking accuracy, the kind of accuracy that shouldn't have been possible without modern tools. Instead of basic outlines, they depict the precise coastline of Antarctica when it wasn't covered in ice, complete with its correct position relative to other continents, hundreds of years before it was officially discovered. They also show the Indonesian and Malaysian peninsula in a single landmass, which was only possible during the last ice age from 12,800 to 11,600 years ago.
During the Ice Age, they show a much extended Indonesia and Malaysian peninsula, and the series of islands that make up Indonesia today are all grouped together into one landmass. And that was the case during the Ice Age.
These maps depict Earth's geography nearly 12,000 years before they were drawn. Were they based on knowledge that was once widely available and accessible to explorers, but has since been lost to time? Whoever drew these maps must have had a bird's-eye view of the world, with the scientific and organizational capabilities to map far-flung, distant places like Antarctica. If that's true, it means that an advanced civilization existed during the last ice age, with the tools, skills, and curiosity to accurately map the planet. So what happened to it? Known as the Younger Dryas, it was caused by fragments of a massive 62-mile comet that exploded in the air, leaving a trail of destruction around the world. The event killed off almost all species of large land mammals around the world. Nearly 70% of all large species went extinct in North America alone.
North America vanished entirely from the record during the Younger Dryas, and it's the time when the mammoths and the saber-toothed tigers vanished from the record as well.
One can find fragments of this global event in cultures around the world. From ancient Egypt to India to the Mississippi Valley, many religions speak of a bygone era of apocalyptic floods and cataclysmic global events. Like the story of Noah's Ark in the book of Genesis. These aren't just imagined myths, but memories of a real world-changing event that changed the course of human history forever. Sea levels rose and civilizations vanished as the world was plunged into an ice age that lasted 1,200 years. According to Hancock, it was the end of a major chapter in the story of human civilization.
I think that's where the whole human story changes. I think that's where we change tracks from one path to another path.
Ancient maps and forgotten journeys. The Piri Reis map was drawn by a Turkish admiral in 1513, and it baffles archaeologists and scholars even today. Only a part of the map survives, but what remains is enough to raise some serious questions. It shows parts of South America and Africa, but also Antarctica, or what looked like Antarctica before it was permanently covered in ice. He wrote the source of that information on this map, Reis, for referring to the largest collection of knowledge in the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria housed maps that were thousands of years old, containing details that were still accessible by European and Turkish scholars between the 13th and 17th centuries. When it was destroyed, these documents were brought to the Turkish capital of Constantinople, which is where Reis found them. He's not the only one. Many other maps from that time depict Antarctica in its exact geographical location, something that shouldn't have been known at that time. These maps hint at a forgotten legacy, whose trail we are just beginning to rediscover. Maps passed down, copied, and recopied through the centuries, stretching back to a time when someone somehow had already charted distant coastlines with uncanny accuracy. Another mystery is longitude. Measuring latitude is easy and was mastered by many early civilizations. Longitude, on the other hand, requires knowing the exact time of your starting position relative to local noon. It was a tough nut to crack for early explorers during the age of exploration. Ships would lose course and crash into coastlines due to miscalculations until the chronometer was invented by John Harrison in 1735. It revolutionized exploration, opening doors to new lands and beginning a new chapter for human civilization. Yet here's the problem. Ancient maps like the Piri Reis chart and Portolono's projections were made with precise longitudinal data. These maps place continents in near-perfect relation to each other, something that shouldn't have been possible before modern chronometers. So either the maps were lucky guesses, or they were based on information from a civilization that understood longitude long before we did. And if it's true, it means someone cracked a problem we couldn't solve until the Age of Enlightenment, possibly at a time when mammoths still roamed the earth. If Reis and other mapmakers from his time were simply recompiling what already existed, then who drew the originals? And how did they possess the knowledge to do so centuries, maybe millennia, before they were supposed to? In 1818, a detailed world map was published, the Pinkerton map.
Classic example of these maps, and I make a point of this, is what's called the Pinkerton world map. And it was based on the latest navigational information at that time.
It included everything 19th century cartographers knew about the Earth. But one thing was missing: Antarctica. At that time, no one had officially discovered it. So, understandably, there was just a blank space at the bottom of the map. Here's where it gets strange. Older maps, much older than you'd expect, do show Antarctica, and not just as a vague shape. They show it in the correct position. They show it larger and without its modern ice sheet. In other words, They show Antarctica as it likely appeared during the last ice age. This isn't just an odd artistic choice. It's a historical contradiction. If Antarctica was still undiscovered in 1818, how could it appear on maps from centuries before? And how could those maps reflect Ice Age geography with such confidence and accuracy? The only explanation Hancock entertains is unsettling. Someone saw Antarctica long before us, not through satellite images, but by sailing there. They did it when its coastlines were still bare rock, not buried under ice. First signs of civilization. The next stop on this trail is North America, where secrets buried under the soil reveal a story that has been rarely discussed. For decades, archaeologists and historians insisted that Clovis was the first human culture to settle and thrive on the continent.
They called them the Clovis culture. We don't know what they called themselves. They were hunter-gatherers. They first appear in the archaeological record 13,400 years ago, and they vanish from the archaeological record 12,600 years ago.
It was believed that before Clovis, humans didn't exist in North or South America. It dominated the discourse until clues started to emerge pointing at older, much older, signs of human habitation in the region.
There was a layer of about 1.5 meters of barren soil, and then beneath that, more human artifacts. And they finally date those back to more than 50,000 years ago.
The story gets even more mysterious in the Amazon, where scientists stumbled upon an ancient genetic clue no one expected. They found DNA markers connecting 3 isolated tribes with people on the other side of the ocean, which is impossible if humans only came to America 13,000 years ago.
The presence in the Amazon rainforest of a very specific, clearly identifiable pattern of DNA, which is only found in one other place in the world, and that is in Australasia.
So how are tribes in the Amazon that have never been contacted by the outside world related to the natives of Oceania? How exactly did their genes travel across oceans and continents? According to Hancock, this is not a coincidence. He believes it's a remnant of ancient global journeys, voyages that happened long before textbooks say they could have. If DNA can drift across time and space like this, maybe so could the people who carried it. Could it point to a forgotten era of advanced, seafaring explorers whose stories were lost, but whose genes remain? We know that the ancient Egyptians built boats. Archaeologists have found them, beautifully crafted vessels dating back over 4,000 years. But for some reason, historians assume that they never ventured far into the open ocean. Why not? If they had the tools, the craftsmanship, and the resources, what stopped them? Maybe nothing did. Maybe we just haven't found the evidence yet. Hancock raises a simple but powerful question. If the Egyptians could build boats, why assume they didn't use them to explore? Why limit their voyages to the Nile when the Mediterranean and even the Atlantic were within reach? From Egyptians to Polynesians to Vikings, history is full of seafaring civilizations that could have gone much further than we think they did. If a civilization can sail a river, it can sail a sea. And if they could sail a sea, they could have seen a world far beyond their home. It gets even more mysterious if you take a closer look at the Amazon. Modern mapping technology has unearthed evidence of an advanced civilization under the rainforest. What looks like a pristine forest, largely untouched by human interference, is actually a long inhabited landscape that has been actively engineered by the people that have lived there for millennia. If we dig deeper, we find signs of a society that was much more advanced than we give it credit for. It completely rewrites everything we think we know about hunter-gatherer societies. These were not just large hunter-gatherer groups, but complex societies that have never been accepted as civilizations by historians.
They were not just builders of fantastically huge earthworks that nobody expected in the Amazon, not just builders of cities that we now know existed in the Amazon, but that they were astronomers and mathematicians as well.
The Lost Road. From the Ottomans to the Amazon to Antarctica, our search for this lost advanced Ice Age civilization brings us to Bimini Road. It's a line of massive flat stones stretching underwater, almost like a paved path or a collapsed wall located off the coast of North America in the shallow waters of the Bahamas. Divers have debated for decades whether it's natural or man-made. Here's what makes it more mysterious. On the Piri Reis map, just off the southeastern coast of North America, there's an island drawn in exactly the same spot. Running through the middle of it is a row of what appear to be megaliths, a road of stones, exactly where Bimini Road is today. Graham Hancock dove there himself. He doesn't argue whether the structure is artificial. He is concerned with something deeper. The Piri Reis map shows this formation above water, but today it's submerged. That means that when it was last mapped, the structure was still above water, or the sea level was much lower, hinting at an ancient civilization that had accurately mapped the area before it was submerged in the ocean.
The key issue is that it features on a map above water, and that is a dating project. That tells us that somebody was mapping that bit of the world when it was above water.
That detail alone may be the biggest clue of all that an ancient mariner once passed through here and marked what they saw. While archaeology and anthropology have been reluctant to accept these findings, the maps, the DNA, the sunken structures, the ancient skeletons, they all come together to tell a story that's hard to ignore. These aren't disconnected, random pieces of trivia scattered around the world. They're historical records of a much bigger part of our history that we have sadly forgotten. Hancock believes that there was a sufficiently advanced civilization during the Ice Age, with the capability to explore and map the Earth with astonishing precision. It was so long ago that only fragments of their knowledge survived, and it made its way into the hands of people like Piri Reis, who unknowingly carried this legacy forward. Other fragments are still scattered across libraries and historical tomes scattered around the world, waiting to be found. We may never see the full picture, but hopefully with enough research, we can pick up where they left off and better understand our unique path in history. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more.